The MVP award, or most commonly known as the Hart Trophy in the NHL, is an incredibly prestigious honor given to the best NHL player in a season. Get 150 points? You'll get a Hart Trophy. Score 65 goals? You'll probably get a Hart Trophy. During the 80s though, it was referred to as Gretzky's Trophy, just because of how much he was winning the damn thing. I mean, 8 in a row? Dude was a mutant. But that's a topic for another day. Now, who decides who wins the Hart? Well, voting is done by members of the Professional Hockey Writers Association. There are 32 representatives of the PHWA, one from every team, to make sure voting stays as unbiased as possible. Let's talk about voting for a second, because that is a huge part of who wins the Hart. The voting criteria has long been known to be a polarizing topic. What criteria do they even vote on? Is it whoever gets the most points, basically turning it into an extension of the Art Ross Trophy, which goes to the highest point score every season? Does it go to a guy who has high production, but is more balanced? Maybe the guy who scores the most goals. Once you start thinking about it, you realize Hart Trophy voting is incredibly confusing and it allows for a great deal of voter bias, because there's not one specific standout to qualify a guy to be the MVP. Historically though, voters have gone with the idea that points matter the most in voting. I say that because 4 of the last 5 MVP winners have led the league in points, with the one standout being Austin Matthews' 2021-22 MVP campaign, which saw him score 60 goals, a feat that hadn't been done since 2011-12 by Stamkos, which, by the way, Stamkos did not get an MVP award for that. Anyway, the 60 goal mark seemed incredibly prestigious to voters, so that's why they voted for Matthews. Although the next season 2 guys scored over 60, meaning that voters will not care as much about such an accomplishment. But to bring you back to my main point, points usually have the most voting effect if there's no milestone at play. And that's how I'll introduce you to all our candidates, through the NHL's point leaderboards this season. First up we have the other guy from Cole Harbour, Nathan McKinnon. Next up we have 2-time Stanley Cup champion Nikita Kucherov. Then we got a guy who's already won 3 past MVPs, Connor McDavid. And our 4th and last candidate is a little bit down on the leaderboard, but nonetheless deserves a spot on this list, Austin Matthews. Just a note, for these comparisons I'm not going to be factoring in who each player plays with, because each team these guys play on are an offensive powerhouse, and each player is surrounded by 1 or 2 notable stars. Let's start with Austin Matthews. Matthews' main attribute to his MVP push is his goal scoring, as he's potted 55 in 65 games, along with 82 points. That puts him on a pace just under 70 goals. Scoring just 62 years ago was basically enough to get him an MVP, and to add on to Matthews' case, he's by far the most complete player out of all the candidates. Out of all the candidates, he has the best face-off percentage at 53%, most takeaways at 69, and most blocked shots at 75. Not to mention, he is the only one out of the 4 that see consistent time on the penalty kill. Matthews has had 50 minutes of time on ice during the penalty kill, and has only been scored on twice during that time. Not to say that is all of his doing, but he has been consistently great in his own end this season. So why wouldn't putting up 70 goals and being the most complete player win him an MVP? I'll go over this better when we get to the other guys, but competition is just better than when Matthews won MVP 2 years ago. When Matthews won in 2021-22, the league leader in points was McDavid with 123, and Matthews was in 5th in the league with 106 points. This season, if projections hold up, the league leaders will be Kucherov with 141 points, McKinnon with 140, and McDavid with 140. And Matthews will be in 10th with 106 points. Even though his point production has stayed the same, and his goal production has jumped tremendously, the league has just taken an even larger jump than him. So for that reason, I can almost guarantee that Matthews will not win MVP. But he is an incredibly streaky goal scorer, so if he goes on a great run from now until the end of the season, and somehow scores 75 or more goals, he may just get the nod. But for now, he will definitely be nominated. I'll put him at 3rd on our list. Our next guy up will be another former MVP, Nikita Kucherov. Kucherov is pacing incredibly well this season, being the obvious standout on the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's got 114 points so far this season, with 40 goals and 74 assists in 66 games. As I mentioned earlier, Kucherov is on pace for 141 points this season, which would be first by far on the Lightning's all-time single-season points record. By the way, number 1 and 2 on that list are also Nikita Kucherov. He is on pace to have another career year, blowing out his MVP season in 2019, where he scored 128 points. Kucherov's point total this season is actually way more impressive than it looks. He leads the league in primary points. Primary points are just goals plus primary assists, and it's used to try to weed out players who get a ton of points off secondary assists, as secondary assists are usually less valuable and important than primary assists and goals. This tells us that Kucherov has had a more meaningful impact on his team's offensive production than the other guys on this list. That's really where it stops for him though. He's an offense-only kind of player. Out of all 4 candidates, he's last in hits, blocked shots, and third in takeaways. If we want to open up his defensive game a little more, let's see where he ranks among all forwards in the league. He's 22nd in takeaways, 200th in blocked shots, and 300th in hits. Okay, I know that hits might not be the most important stat, but it still shows he's not quite a complete player at all. If you want more proof, he is also first in giveaways with 80 in the entire league, which tells us that he's a bit careless. When the puck is on the offensive end, he's one of, if not the best guy out there in the NHL right now. The issue is that about half the game is played in the offensive end, and it seems like his interest ends when they leave the offensive zone. For those reasons, I think Kucherov is going to rank last in MVP voting out of our 4 candidates. Now we've gotten number 3 and 4 out of the way, so we've gotten our top 2 guys left, McKinnon and McDavid. Let's talk about McDavid first. He's the guy we've known him to be his entire career, a perennial 100-plus point player. He's on pace for 139 points this year, and if that holds up, he'll have the first 100-assist season since Gretzky and Lemieux, which is a milestone to behold. McDavid has never been an angel on defense, but he's definitely not as bad as Kucherov. Despite that, McDavid's lackluster defense hasn't stopped him from winning MVP in the past. But there's something in his way that I think will stop him from being MVP that's a little unfair for him. See, voters like to gravitate towards a guy who's having kind of a one-off season, rather than voting for the same guy every year. Of course, you'll see the inverse of that a tiny bit, where a voter will vote for McDavid just because he's McDavid, and kind of disregard stats. But mostly, voters gravitate toward the new guy on the block. If McDavid had the exact same stats as, let's say, Elias Lindholm next season, voters would choose Lindholm more than McDavid for purely unfair reasons that McDavid can't even control. This also happens in other sports, most notably to Mike Trout in the MLB. Trout was unarguably the best player in the MLB in the 2010s, but only won 3 MVPs because each year voters found someone a little worse than him they could vote for to switch up the face of the MVP award. McDavid has led the league in points 5 times in his career already, and lost out on MVP twice, and both times it was to a player who'd never won the award before. Taylor Hall in 2017-18, and Austin Matthews in 2021-22. I can level with the NHL on this one, because from a purely media standpoint, it's better to give the MVP award to a new guy every year to bring hype and excitement to that market. But at the same time, these awards should be purely about the talent, and not the marketability. With McDavid not winning though, and landing in second place on our leaderboard, that leaves us with Nathan McKinnon as my choice for the 2023-24 Hart Trophy. First off, one of the reasons he's gonna win is the fact that he's never won a Hart in his career, and all of the other candidates, Kucherov, McDavid, and Matthews have. But that's not to downplay the type of season he's having at all. He's put up 42 goals and 73 assists in 67 games, good for 115 points, which is a 140-point pace. He's up there, if not better than any of the other candidates this season. He's not terrible defensively either, with 55 blocks this season, which is second among the candidates. He is lacking with hits though, ranking 3rd in the group with 49. Despite that, how could the NHL not want Nathan McKinnon as the MVP? He has been one of the league's most dynamic players since his entrance into the NHL, and he's been robbed of a heart earlier in his career. He definitely should have won in 17-18, where he put up 97 points in 74 games, and dragged a basement-dwelling Avalanche team into the playoffs, but instead lost out to Taylor Hall, who had 93 points in 76 games. Nonetheless though, that wrongdoing should be rectified this season, and Nathan McKinnon should be, as long as the scoring race stays relatively unchanged, the 2023-24 Hart Trophy recipient. Before this video ends, I just want to make something very clear. I do not think McKinnon is just being handed the MVP trophy for media purposes. He is 100% deserving of the award, but there is definitely an aspect of his marketability that is a part of it. That's it for this week from me though, so thank you all for the support. Shoot me a like and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed today's video. Stay tuned for weekly uploads on Saturdays at 1 PM Eastern, and in the meantime you can check out my last video on the Canucks. See you all later.